The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Monday, May 6th, 2019. Hope you have a good weekend and not a case of the Mondays. But to start the week the right way, we have on the show today Paul Tenorio, national writer for The Athletic, joining us today. First of all, Paul, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, Paul. The reason we booked you on Friday was to try and get a little bit more information about the latest rumor about how TFC will be using its allocation spot. They've, of course, had the number one spot in the allocation order for a while. Well, they traded away for it and got it back again twice, so obviously they intend to use it. And the latest rumor, as reported by yourself, is Omar Gonzalez. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, the club is in discussions with Omar Gonzalez. They'd like to bring him to Toronto. There are obviously some moving pieces here. Omar Gonzalez is still under contract with Atlas in Liga MX. So if they want to get him out ahead of the summer window, they'd have to come to an agreement with Atlas. And then, of course, financially, they have to come to terms with the player. So both of those sides of the negotiations are ongoing. And, it's a matter of whether or not they can come to a deal and make it happen. But it certainly is the goal of Toronto to get Omar Gonzalez onto the roster.
Fair enough. And I think anyone who's watched TFC early in the season understands that there has been, we'll call it an issue at the back. I'm wondering from your perspective as an outside observer, whether you think this is where Toronto should be spending its TAM money.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting move. Certainly, I think they need depth and help at center back. Omar Gonzalez is a good player. The issue with Omar has always been he's not exactly known for his pace and his athleticism. He's very good in the air. He's been much better on the ball, and he's got great leadership skills. He's won trophies pretty much almost everywhere he's been before he made this move to Atlas, which struggled this year in Liga MX. And so there are a lot of positives to bringing Omar Gonzalez in, but their back line has struggled because they don't have that athleticism and that pace that you see so much of in MLS to try to counteract as a back line. That being said, it's not as though Omar Gonzalez is coming from an inferior league where he's not had to deal with quick, pacey, very talented attacking players. Liga MX has a lot of really good talent up top. He's been defending in that league now for the last 3 or 4 years. And, certainly I think anytime you add somebody with that type of experience into your back line, it can help organize things. And I think that we saw that happen with Drew Moore back in 2017 when he got inserted into the back line. And I think Omar Gonzalez can do something similar.
When we look at TFC and the fact that a couple months ago they went all the way up to the top of the location order, do you think they had in mind the defender position? Do you think they had in mind Omar Gonzalez a few weeks ago when they got that top of the allocation order? And is there any correlation in your mind between the play of Laurent Simon and maybe the inclusion of an Omar Gonzalez down the road?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, yes, I do believe that this has been the plan all along. I do believe that discussions have been ongoing, and certainly interest was there, and that kind of moved these things forward. And yeah, anytime you're managing a roster, the play of certain players at different positions is going to factor in. You look at it and you say, okay, where do we need depth, and are we happy with what we've got at this position or that position? So I think Toronto feels like they need to add some more help at the center back position. And, Omar Gonzalez checks that box. They're at the top of the allocation order. They made it a priority to be there. And now they have a chance to add a veteran player who they believe can help them.
Now, looking at Toronto's season so far, a bit of a surprise of great results compared to last year. Are you surprised by Toronto's result? Looking at the roster and the pieces like Josie Altidore when he's healthy, one of the best strikers in the continent, are you surprised by Toronto's result, or did you expect a bounce back from last year's difficult season?
No, I think we all expected a bounce back for Toronto. I was a little bit surprised that they got off to as slow of a start as they did. I still think this is a very talented roster. We've seen what they're capable of when they're playing their best soccer. Losing Jovinko was going to be a big blow. We knew that, but Pozuelo has come in and he's played well. Obviously, the Altidore injury hurts, but they were still able to get a result on the weekend. And I think we're seeing much more of the Toronto FC that we expected. I mean, when you look at points per game, they are top the East, averaging 2 points per game right now. And I think they're going to be there all season long. I think that they are a team that's going to contend in a very weak Eastern Conference. Toronto has a chance to take advantage of that and put themselves in a position to be one of the top teams coming out of the conference. Now, we'll see how this season unfolds. It's going to be a much different MLS than we've seen in years past. It's a one-off game now in the playoffs. So good teams are going to lose in the early rounds, even with home field advantage. But I think Toronto FC is certainly reestablishing itself as a top team in this league. They've got the talent to do it, and it's just a matter of kind of getting that consistency back and getting that confidence back, because certainly that's been lacking.
To finish up the Toronto FC conversation, there is a lot of speculation in the city that I'm in right now that they've been after a winger, a wide player, a dynamic wide player for some time. Do you hear anything on that front? Do you think Toronto was looking to bring in 2 players in this window or at least in the summer?
Yes, certainly. They would like to add some more attacking pieces, and you're right. The winger spot has been an area that they've been targeting throughout this primary window. I know they'd like to get something done. Obviously, the deadline is tomorrow, so it might be tough to get that move finalized before the end of the primary window, but just a couple months before the start of the secondary transfer window. And that work is always ongoing. If they do want to add somebody in the secondary window, you would imagine that their goal will be to get that contract done and agreed to, so that right when the window opens, the paperwork is done and the player can step right in, maybe even arrive before the opening of that window and get some training sessions in. So I would expect Toronto to be active and to try to make another move, yes.
Now, Paul, when we're looking at the rest of the league as well, we're hearing a lot of rumors, we're hearing a lot of things going on. Is there one team in particular that you can say they're in need of a desperate position in particular?
I think there are a lot of teams that need to add some talent. I would expect Columbus, as they continue to make a little bit of a slide here, they're going to have to do some things to try to break out of this funk, and they're going to be very active in the secondary window. They lose Zach Steffen, who's going to head to Manchester City. I think they'll add a goalkeeper for competition with Joe Bendick. I could see them adding some help in the attacking end at winger as well. I thought Chicago Fire made a nice move with Francisco Calvo coming to the back line. I would expect that they may still also be looking for defensive help to strengthen that roster. FC Cincinnati, really, really struggling. I would expect change in Cincinnati. They've limited themselves in that they spent a lot of allocation money, so they're going to have to figure out how much flexibility they have and how deep of a hole do they want to dig for next year by pulling Tam forward from 2020 into 2019. Those are some of the teams I think could certainly be active. We've seen also a team like Colorado already making a coaching change. I would expect that we'll hear news on their coaching search before the start of the secondary transfer window.
You mentioned Colorado, Paul, and I just can't go anywhere else but Colorado. What's happening? 2 points this season so far. We can say honestly it's been over a year now that Colorado is not meeting expectation. I think we're being kind by putting it this way, but this year, with the ambitions shown in the offseason, and started last year with the Kellen Acosta trade, and obviously this offseason with the signings and the trades and the investment in the roster, I thought Colorado was going to at least get out of its usual bottom of the West spot. But boy, was I wrong, Paul.
Yeah, it's tough. Sam Stejskal just wrote a great story for us at The Athletic about, these are problems that start at the very top. With an ownership that's not very active, hasn't put a lot of investment into this team. They have salaries that are high, but they've done such a poor job in selecting that talent from abroad. That goes back to infrastructure as well. They don't have a scouting network. They're way behind other MLS teams. They spent money on players like Tim Howard, which was a terrible return on investment for a player who was aging in a league where you don't spend millions of dollars on the goalkeeper position. And so there's a lot that's going wrong there. I agree. I thought it was a smart tack to go within the league to try to build the roster out from there. It hasn't worked out well. And I think that, a coaching change was absolutely necessary. We'll see if getting the right coach in can turn things around. But, for Colorado in the long term to be considered anything more than a perennial bottom of the table team, they're going to have to change their model. They're going to have to change how much investment they're putting into the team, how much investment they're putting into the infrastructure, or else we're going to see them at the bottom of the Western Conference year after year.
Yesterday's game, Atlanta United 3, Sporting Kansas City 0. I want to talk about both of those teams, and let's start with Kansas City first. I can't help but think that there's a correlation between the issues they're having right now and the fact that they went deep into that Champions League, into the semifinals, had to go through all that progress. We saw the same thing, of course, happen last year with Toronto FC going to the final and then their season just going to a toilet. Do you think that back-to-back years of seeing top teams sort of decimated by injury after they go deep in this, first off, do you agree with my thesis? And second off, do you think that the league recognizes this and will do things moving forward to try and help these teams that are in that competition a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously a correlation between going deep into Champions League and the injuries that have followed. It's very difficult for MLS teams with the schedule of Champions League to be playing highly competitive games that early in the season, and to have that strong of a schedule where you're playing so many games in such a short period of time, so soon after preseason. And MLS is going to have to do something. I would expect with the season starting earlier next year, already that schedule has been decided that they'll start a few weeks earlier than they did. I think that will be helpful, but I certainly believe the discussions in these CBA negotiations are going to be to try to shorten the preseason up a little bit. Shorten the offseason up, get players into preseason earlier. They need to find a way to start playing more competitive games earlier on in order to be prepared for Champions League. Also, I would expect that coaches like Peter Vermees, GMs, are going to be asking for increased roster sizes. Clearly, MLS teams lack in depth, and I think that's just the reality. Multiple areas are going to have to go hand in hand here, right? The salary budget's going to have to go up. It's not just about putting on more roster spots and adding players who don't really help your depth because they're not good enough to play. They're going to need to be able to spend more money to go add players that can actually provide depth. And I would expect that to be a big part of the discussions as well.
Fair enough. And they said the other side of that coin from yesterday's game was Atlanta United, now 2 wins in a row after, a very slow start, unexpected start for a lot of people. Is it fair to say that they probably figured this out now and that they will be closer to what they were last year, closer to what people expect moving forward?
I'm not ready to say that yet. Look, they've taken advantage of some weaker opponents, and I think they've also, they got Sporting Kansas City, had a good time to get Sporting Kansas City. They didn't even have a full bench yesterday with the injuries and the national team duty that they have. So, beating Colorado, beating New England, and beating this Sporting Kansas City side is to me not the best indicator of where a team is. We'll see more of what this Atlanta team is against Toronto this coming Wednesday at New York Red Bulls in a few weeks. That's where I think we're going to start to get a better gauge. And they're going to have to do it now without Ezequiel Barco, who's headed down to the Argentina under-20 team for the U20 World Cup. So am I ready to give them a thumbs up? No. But I do think that this is a team full of players that, function on confidence. And to start to get these results is a big deal, especially for a player like Joseph Martinez. Now the key is going to be to get Pity Martinez playing at the level that they need him to play to provide that confidence he needs. If he gets going, he was the best player in South America last year. He can be an absolute game changer in this league. I just think he needs that first goal to happen, and then we'll start to see. I'll be a little bit more confident to say they're back. But right now, I think it's a little premature.
Fair enough. We'll wrap it up with this one. And my partner sitting in Montreal was, I guess, maybe too modest to ask the question. But to me, the impact had been maybe the surprise of the season in terms of their ability to get points on the road, their strength high up in that Eastern Conference after playing a heavy road schedule to start the year. I guess I'm asking you, do you feel that the Impact are underrated, getting the respect that they deserve in the league?
Yeah, I do think they're underrated. Actually, if you go back to last season and you start from mid-June on, I thought Montreal actually had a really, really great season. Once Remy Gard was able to kind of install his system, get things going, they actually were one of the better teams in the East over the second half of the season. It's just that they had such a poor start to begin the year that they weren't able to dig themselves out of that hole. So I wasn't surprised at all by this. I had Montreal as a playoff team going into the season. I believe that they were going to be a contender in the East. And I think we're just seeing a good coach who's put a roster together that he has pieces that fit in the roles he wants them to fit in. Obviously, they're going to be even better when Piatti is back and healthy again. This is a good Montreal team, and I'm not surprised by it. And I do think that they aren't getting their due league-wide. But, I don't think it's going to be kept a secret for that much longer if they continue to perform well.
Paul Tenorio, national writer for The Athletic Soccer. Thank you very much for your time today, Paul, and we hope to talk to you soon as well.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
And you can follow Paul's work, of course, on The Athletic, theathleticsoccer.com, and you can find all his work on his own personal Twitter, at Paul Tenorio. We'll be right back after this short break to review the weekend. A lot of games happened.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kevin Laramee with Duane Rollins. We're going to review a bit of Major League Soccer, Duane, for sure, and we'll talk about the Canadian Premier League on Thursday on our Two Solitude Soccer podcast, for sure. But there was a lot of games this weekend, and let's just start Friday night, Duane, because the Whitecaps got a win. Colorado got another loss, 3-2 for Vancouver on the road versus the wooden spoon contenders of the Colorado Not So Rapid, and 3-2 for Vancouver on the road.
Yeah, I mean, it was a decent USL match, I felt.
Colorado Springs, what are these? The Switchbacks. It was the Switchbacks versus WFC2.
Oh, look, yeah, I wasn't alone in this. It was kind of a dreadful game all around. I mean, and maybe there's some confirmation bias going in there. I'm open to that suggestion, but two struggling teams, but Colorado in particular, and we do have a Colorado guest booked for tomorrow to try and break this down a little bit further, because we are truly talking about historic stuff. If you missed our Friday show, I set it up by saying that this is a team that, had they lost on the weekend, would be behind the pace of the most infamous team that I have ever been involved with or covered, the 2012 Toronto FC team, which of course is Danny Kuberman's famous worst team in the world. They now are below that pace, and in fact they are below the pace of they're on pace for the worst season in MLS history. Now, it's early. They can change that around for sure. I mean, we were talking about, Minnesota 2 years ago.
Sorry to interrupt, Duane. The worst season was DC United, correct? With 13 or 16 points?
16 points,
okay.
Yeah.
I just had the 13 in my mind, but I wasn't too off. 16 point DC United in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, the actual year where they won the U.S. Open Cup, too.
Yeah, bizarrely. And then they were good. That was such a strange team.
And they played well in the Champions League.
Yeah, well, and they bookended. If you look at DC United 2011 was a Supporters Shield contender. DC United in 2013 was top of the East again, but they had this insane season in the middle that made no sense. But at any rate, that was an odd time. But yeah, that team, if you're interested, had 4 points after 10 games. So this is bad in Colorado. It's cluster, as Paul said. It starts at the top. I don't think that they know what they're doing. This is the commonality of every bad team that I have ever watched in this league. Is if you look at them and break it down, it really starts with their decision making. It's not necessarily the players. They bring in poor players.
Yeah, well, poor people to take the decisions, and then they'll bring poor players in. But you have to be humble, right? In a position like this. And what I mean by humble is being able to acknowledge when you screwed up. Being able to say, yeah, that's my bad, and I'm going to try to fix it. But often people in positions to take decisions and to make those calls, well, they want to protect their reputation more than fixing a situation. It's not about your reputation. It's about, will the team be better? And I think sometimes you have to openly acknowledge that, yeah, we screwed up. We made a mistake. We didn't sign the right people. We didn't hire the right persons for the job. But you know what? Starting now, we will do a due diligence. We'll look at the scouting. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's one of those cases where It starts higher than the coach. It's higher than the manager. It starts with the ownership group, which are not showing people ambition about anything, and I think it trickles down. And we've seen this with other clubs in this league for a long time. Colorado is just the latest to be like Chicago, basically.
Yeah, and Toronto back in the day, or the way Minnesota launched, and we're seeing with Vancouver right now. Look, it starts at the top and it goes down from there. What's the old saying about rolling downhill? It's a little crude, but nonetheless, that's what happens here. Look, it's a long way out too, but at the same time, I've always said, in Major League Soccer, anyone who talks about 5-year building plans is talking out their bum, because you can rebuild in a year in MLS. But the first thing that they need to do in Colorado, and that they do have the advantage of this being actually in place for them, is they have to shed some of those bad contracts. It was the first thing, like I said, when TFC was the worst team in the world, the first thing Tim Bajchenko did when he came in is he got rid of the bad contracts and he started from scratch. And in 2014, they brought in one that didn't work out, and they immediately moved on from that. And you've got to make decisions quickly like that, and you have to make tough decisions quickly. And that's how you can turn it around quickly. But again, you can. It was 2012 to 2017 was 5 years. It wasn't a plan. It just took 5 years to win the MLS Cup, right? And the same thing can happen in Colorado if you do it correctly. Now, the difference, of course, is that the league has changed now too. So that's another issue that they have to factor in. But they're bad right now. They're bad, and I don't know whether they're going to get better anytime quick.
It's going to get worse before it gets better, I think.
Yeah, will they get, compete for that 16 points?
You might finish at 11 point or something.
Yeah, I mean...
Well, the West is good, too. That's the thing. They're playing good teams on a regular basis. You can't play San Jose 8 times. And even then, San Jose is better than you. So they're going to beat you all season long. So
San Jose's been doing pretty well.
Exactly.
Weeks. Yeah.
They're finally figuring out Matias Almeida's system.
Yeah. I mean, there is, I think, each year that goes on, and this is a broken record. It's a theme of the last year and a half or so, is that we talk about how there is an increasing divide in how these teams break down, and we're seeing it with this. There are haves and there are have-nots, and they don't meet as much anymore. There's less crossover there, and as you say, the West is very competitive at the top. You have 5 or 6 teams in that West, and everyone assumes that SKC is going to figure it out, although maybe we shouldn't assume that, because we assumed Toronto was going to figure it out all last year, and they didn't.
That's true.
So sometimes when that stuff's rolling down the hill,
you just got to step aside and let it pass you. Otherwise, you're going to need to do some washing.
Yeah, precisely. And no one wants that.
No. All right, let's quickly take a look at the games. But before we do so, we have to say goodbye to Duane for today. Duane will be back tomorrow, as always. So, Duane, have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And while Duane is going away, we'll be looking at the rest of the scores from Major League Soccer in the weekend. New York, LA Galaxy, 3-2 for the Red Bulls. Big win at home for the Red Bulls versus Zlatan. Nope, Red Bull Arena was not full, and that's a par for normal game for the Red Bulls. But 3-2 at home against the Galaxy, slowly turning things around in New Jersey. Orlando 0, TFC 2. Big win for TFC on the road. Houston 2, Dallas 1. The Texas Derby has been won by the orange side for this round. Montreal 0, NYCFC 2. And I can tell you a bit more about this game. Montreal did not create anything in this game. Maybe created 2 scoring chances, not 1 shot on target. Okonkwo with a header above the crossbar, and I would say with Tider with a header too, a bit wide right, were the 2 best chances for the Impact. Maxi Morales is a game changer. He's one of the best players in the league, and I was talking to Yuka Raitala, defender for the Montreal Impact, after the game, asking Yuka, what's the difference between playing NYCFC with Maxi Morales and playing NYCFC without Maxi Morales? Like, well, with him, they're a lot better. He's always on you. He harasses you. He gets the better of you, and he's relentless. He's not gonna give you an inch of space. He's gonna chip, chirp and get that ball off of you and try to be a bit influential with the result. We saw that yesterday at Stade Saputo. Montreal losing 2-0 at home versus NYCFC. Philly 6, New England 1. And this game was 1-1 at halftime. What a second half for the Union. Goals galore. What time is it? Yeah, it's 6 past the keeper. And Philadelphia has put a marker on New England on Saturday. DC United 3, Columbus 1. What's going on with Columbus? They're on a downward trajectory as we speak. And if they're not lucky, you'll have teams that will climb out. The Red Bulls and NYCFC are starting to figure it out, and they could take over Columbus in the standings really quickly. Minnesota won, Seattle won. A very good result in Minnesota. In Minnesota, Alliance Field, Minnesota won, Seattle won. Not a bad result at all. Portland getting a road win. A very important win for Gio Savarese. Won 2 goals, so 2-1 for Portland versus Real Salt Lake. Salt Lake just... They're tough to handicap, Real Salt Lake, this year. I don't know which one is going to show up from game to game. They can beat the best team in the league on any given day, but they can lose to one of the worst as well. So that's a bit where my concern is with Real Salt Lake. I'm not sure where they fit right now in the league. San Jose 1, FC Cincinnati 0. With a red card, still Matias Almeida and the Quakes won another game. It's a couple in a row now. It's a couple of good results for the Quakes. And they ain't in the bottom of the West anymore. And they're getting really far away from it. San Jose 1, FC Cincinnati 0. LAFC Chicago, a scoreless draw at Bank of California. I guess you do have to tell Carlos Vela and the rest, like, you know what, today, don't overexert yourself. It's a long season. You're going to have a busy summer. Let's keep it under 130 heartbeats per minute for you for today, and that's what happened. Sporting Kansas City 0, Atlanta 3. I think Duane is right when he mentioned to Paul earlier in the show that could be CONCACAF Champions League hangover, Sporting Kansas City. It could be. We'll see if it is. Atlanta United 3-0 at Dignity Health Stadium in Sporting Kansas City. Is it not? They all change names so quickly that I can't keep up. What's Kansas City Stadium? Yeah, the stadium in Kansas City. That's what I'm going to call it. And those were the scores in Major League Soccer this weekend. But there was another league in Canada with some games. Saturday, May 4th, the Halifax Wanderers opened Wanderers ground with a 2-1 victory versus Forge FC. Akeem Garcia with the opening goal. Pop that collar, Akeem. It looks great with the baby blue on your Wanderers jersey. And it's a truly Canadian game. Cavalry FC 2, New York 9 1. This happened at Spruce Meadows, the opening of this newly soccerized stadium in the outskirts of Calgary. And, well, it looks really good. And this is very Canadian. It was snowing on May 4th during a soccer game. It really did look good on TV. And the last game Saturday was Valor at home opening IG Field Investors Group Field versus FC Edmonton and losing 2-1 in their first game at home for Valor. But those were the games in the Canadian Premier League this weekend, and we'll give you more details on it this Thursday on the Two Solitude Soccer Podcast, which you can get access to for $2 a month. 50 cents a week, you get access to at least a show a week, if not more. Articles in the future. The majority of our Canadian Premier League coverage of Duane and I will be on the Two Solitude Soccer Podcast. And you can find the free version anywhere you get your podcasts. We have Soccer Today published on there and free versions of the Two Solitude Soccer Podcast. And you can look for the premium version at patreon.com/sports podcast network. But as always, until tomorrow we have a scheduled Abby Mood on the show. She writes for the Burgundy Waves in Colorado and will join us once again to talk about the struggles of the team from Denver. But until tomorrow, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. We thank you very much for your support, for your financial support, for your moral support, for your soccer support. And Chelsea is back in the Premier League. on that note, well, back in the Premier League. Of course they're in the Premier League. No, Kevin, get some coffee. Chelsea is back in the Champions League, baby. Have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.